very welcome to the Inner Evolution Summit. And today my journey is going to Mexico, very far away from Europe. And today I have the honor to interview Charles Ridley, who is also very often in Europe and who is an osteopath since, I think, 49 years already. And so very, very long. He has worked with people and really explored this body work very, very deeply, and is giving trainings and courses all over the world. He's a world famous teacher. He's a trainer and an author of many books like Stillness, Stillness Touch, and the German one, Präsent in der Stille. So, Charles, I'm very happy today that we can talk about osteopathy and what it has to do with also our inner evolution, and what it has to do with the immune system healing, and also, and how it can help us also to have a richer inner life, and a life which is healthy and maybe even more happy and painless.
Yes, yes. And that's really the point of the osteopathic impulse. Even though it started out as a mechanical impulse, where Dr. Sutherland, the founder of all cranial, is Dr. Sutherland, and he was an American who lived in the Midwest of all places, in the middle of the country. And, you know, in the 1890s or so, he started, I think it was 1898, he went to college for osteopathy, and he saw some bones in a plastic case. They were held in space, all in their articulatory relationships in space, and he had this impulse. And back then, cranial bones didn't move, the belief was. But he had a crazy impulse. It was the temporal bones move like the gills of a fish. And it possessed him. And so then he started studying the cranial anatomy like a crazy man. And he started doing projects on himself with a helmet, tightening it. And he saw that he could create, accidentally, of course, because he wasn't meaning to create them, different states of consciousness by the way he tightened the helmet onto his head. Sometimes, so sometimes he would be depressed, sometimes he would be elated, sometimes he would be a little bit psychotic, sometimes he would be sad, he would be happy. And so he went, oh my God, this is really a key to something. And so he researched and researched and researched for years, and didn't tell anybody, because, you know, this was the 1890s, 1900 early times. His wife had to put up with him going into the garage every day and doing these projects on himself, and she didn't know who was going to come into the house that evening. Was it a crazy man? Was it a depressed man? Was it a sad man? And anyway, so he started developing a theory. Initially, it was mechanical, but the theory was that the brain and the spinal cord pulse. And in that pulsing, the cerebral spinal fluid moves, and that movement creates life force throughout the body. It emanates life force throughout the whole body, through the nerves and the channels. And that was sort of the beginnings of osteopathy. And he was completely ridiculed about it, because even today, modern medical American osteopaths and medical doctors still insist that cranial bones do not move, which to people that touch like me is ludicrous, because not only do cranial bones move, but the entire whole body breathes with this movement. But that's the first stage. So he went from a mechanical stage, this stage, and then he moved to California from the Midwest. But he developed this mechanical theory and called it cranial in osteopathy in the cranial field and started teaching. I think there were 2 or 3 people in his first class, and it went over like a lead balloon. But he pursued and he kept on going because this impulse wouldn't let him go. It just had him. It was a spiritual impulse, but it was a mechanical principle. But later, when he moved from the Midwest to the ocean, to Point Pinos in a town on the beach, a little town on the beach, he began to sense a larger pulse, an earthly pulse that affected his whole bodily being. And he then began to talk about the breath of life, and he began to talk about spiritual principles and connecting with the intelligence with a capital I, the same intelligence that creates the whole world and runs the universe, and the master mechanic, and on and on and on. He still had a mechanical slant, you know. And that's how the biodynamic work was born. It was not called biodynamics while he was alive, but he understood that the biodynamic principle, meaning the mechanical processes of how life force goes throughout every cell in the body, and it emanates the health in the body, and it expands consciousness.
Wow.
Now, So that's how biodynamics was born. It was started out as just this notion of bones move, 1. 2, no, not just the bones, the brain and spinal cord move vis-a-vis the sac that's around it, called the dura. And inside the dura is cerebrospinal fluid. And cerebrospinal fluid has the potency of the breath of life inside it. And that potency is the health force in our bodies. And it's the same force that at conception creates a human being in 9 months. 2 cells join, the potency of the breath of life creates this mysterious process that in 9 months, there's a 50 trillion cell child that walks around and calls itself Charles or Matthias or whoever. And so biodynamics is now based on the principle of the embryological principle. And your country gave birth to the man that discovered this, Blechschmidt, Eric Blechschmidt, famous embryologist. He too was looked at in a very awkward way because he discovered the opposite principle that medical dogma stuck with. The medical dogma is structure dictates function. Mm-hmm. So all you have to do is move the structure, the function changes. Well, he discovered that it's function that creates structure. And so if you go deeper than the structure into the mysterious hidden forces that make the structure, i.e. the function, you can make things occur health-wise without interfering with the body. You don't need to move things around. So that's what osteopaths did with the function creates structure. In other words, potency and the movement of potency in the cells that creates motions, that create substances and chemicals and processes, then creates anatomy, organs, and then creates the whole body working as one unit, accessing the invisible force, not by feeling motion with your hands or feeling motion in a person's body over there, but by feeling the motion in yourself along with your person you're touching. So the whole system went from, I'm a doctor, you're a patient, you have cranial bones, I'm going to move cranial bones and you'll be healthy. It went from that to, oh, there's this mystery, this really, they didn't use the word spiritual because they're still medical. They're not allowed to use that word. It's heresy. But there's this breath of life that created the body that also maintains the body and it heals the body. And so let's access that. And how do we access that? through an inner meditation processes. We access our own inner potency in our bodies from a practitioner perspective. And by doing that and then touching a person on the table, they become connected to their wisdom of the body. And then wisdom of the body talks to wisdom of the body. And all we have to do as a so-called practitioner is let that impact us inwardly in our own body field, not over there, objectifying a patient like a subject object. That's gone in biodynamics. This is more co-equal. It's a process of mutuality. There are two mysteries. One is laying down on the table. One is sitting up and touching. And they're connected by this potency, this invisible force that made the body, maintains the body, and heals the body. And so that is what biodynamics is in essence. And that's what Dr. Sutherland brought us. He died before he could articulate all this, but he had a close group of people around him, and they sort of did it. I wouldn't call it secret, but they were the ones that really understood that this was very profoundly esoteric, not in a woo-woo way, but in a very practical way. So out of that group, a whole, like, I don't know how many there were, but they went out and disseminated Dr. Sutherland's work. And one of the main people was who disseminated it was a man named Dr. Roland Becker. And he was not only his protege, Dr. Sutherland's protege, he was his attending physician, because in the United States, osteopaths are medically licensed. There are hospitals in the United States that are osteopathic hospitals.
Oh, that's different.
Yeah, they can take your liver out and give you a new liver, or give birth, have a mother give birth to a child or sign a death certificate. They can do brain surgery in the United States. In the other countries, they're still just hands-on healers. So there's sort of a division now in osteopathy in the United States between the medical people, they're the ones that say cranial bones don't move, they still say that, and the more non-medical, the biodynamic osteopaths. Now I was in on, I started, as you noticed, as you mentioned, I started in 1973. What happened to me is I was on a spiritual path, and one of my satsangis, the person who came to satsang with me, with that spiritual teacher, was an eye doctor. And one day we were at his house after satsang. We went every Sunday and we meditated for 2 hours during our satsangs. This was in the 70s. And he said, "Oh, I think you would enjoy getting a cranial session." And you remember how Sutherland, the bones moved like a gills of the fish? The word cranial sent me into hysteria in a good way. I went, "What? What's that?" And he said, "Oh," and he explained it to me a little bit. And I immediately wrote everything down. I got the name of the doctor. I went up and got a session, one session. And my consciousness, and it was a mechanical session, my consciousness expanded for 30 days. I was absolutely just flabbergasted that somebody doing things to my cranial bones could send me into a deep, expanded, infinite state of consciousness for a month. And I said, I've got to do this for a living. And so I'm just 19 or so, however, I'm not very old. I'm a gardener, and I asked that doctor, the man that gave me the cranial session, who he studied with, where he went to school, what books did I need to read, and he told me, and I just went straight to doing that. And then I graduated in 1981. So from 73 to 81, all I did was study cranial.
So you learned osteopathy, or did you learn craniosacral balancing?
Well,
what is the difference? That this would be.
Oh boy, you're gonna get me into a little rat hole here, but I'll go with you on this one. So I didn't do osteopathy because I had, I went crazy and took all the studies, and I started taking the courses from an osteopath named Dr. DeJarnette, and he was in Nebraska, Omaha City, Nebraska. No, Omaha, Nebraska. This was a lot of years ago, so I don't forget the names. And I took courses. Every course he offered, I'd take it before I even got into college. So while I was in pre-medical or pre-osteopathy, I went and worked in a hospital. And in that, I was a clerk. As part of what you get points for working in a hospital to get into medical school while you're in pre-med.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So I did that, and I really realized I couldn't go medical. It was too tough. It was too tough on my soul. It was really tough watching what was happening in the emergency rooms. And I was the clerk, so I would you come in with like your arm dangling off your shoulder from a car accident, and I'd take all your information and put you in a room, and then the doctor and the nurses would attend to you. And I unfortunately saw what that was really like, and it was too much for me. And I knew I couldn't change it from within, so I said, I can't be a part of this. So I went to chiropractic college, which is where my cranial practitioner had gone, that I got treated by, and call that a treatment, and it expanded my consciousness for 30 days. So I went to the college he went to, which was Palmer College in Davenport, Iowa. And so I went to school for 3 years before chiropractic, and then 4 years of chiropractic. And then I went right to Manhattan and started a practice with 4 other cranial practitioners. It was a cranial office by one of Dr. DeJarnette's teachers. And he invited me to come to Manhattan. So I'm going to go back to your question. What's the difference between cranial sacral practitioners and licensed cranial practitioners? And there's 2 types of licensed cranial practitioners. There are osteopaths, DOs, and they're chiropractors, DCs, and MDs and dentists can take the DO work. They can take the courses, but chiropractors aren't allowed to take the courses. This is the United States. They aren't allowed because we're like heathens. We're not medical. We're not, so we don't have a license for drugs and surgery. So we can't go and take their courses. Mm-hmm. So there's this split, but they're all of them are portal of entry licenses. In other words, a patient can come and they can see you and they can get insurance reimbursement, and they're fully licensed by the state and the state board, and you take state exams and that whole thing. And each one of those, including osteopathy, cranial is something you take on the side. You don't get that in college. Nobody gets that in college. It's extracurricular training that you opt into after you graduate. I cheated. Am I going to confess this in public? I cheated in the 70s and took courses for 7 years before I graduated because they didn't ask me if I had graduated. Mm-hmm. And because I was so insanely interested in learning this work, I took the courses and became a complete highly trained cranial expert before I even graduated from chiropractic college. And that's why I was invited to work in this office in Manhattan. Mm-hmm. So, and I took thousands and thousands of hours of cranial. And my school training was something like 5,000 or 6,000 hours. And my pre-med was something like 3,000 or 4,000. So that's about almost 10,000 hours, and maybe 5,000 hours of cranial. So I had 12 to 15,000 hours of training. Now, take that and put it in your pocket. That's a lot of training.
This is really huge. Yes.
See, cranial sacral therapists can become and called a cranial sacral therapist can take 4 courses, 4 24-hour or 32-hour courses, mm-hmm. and call themselves a cranial sacral therapist. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there's a little bit of an attitude, you can even feel it in me, between osteopaths and chiropractors versus the people who have taken 4 courses and call themselves a practitioner. Now, I'm not going to criticize that because I spend all of my time training those people.
Yeah.
Happily.
It might be an entrance door to learn more, no?
Exactly. So I don't have a problem with people doing that. Matter of fact, it's very unique that I've discovered the more highly trained a person is medically, the more difficult it is to learn this work.
Okay. So it has a lot to do. Does it have to do with intuition, or does it have to, or do you expand also your feeling so that you're really becoming more sensitive to the energies and of the body, of the whole system?
You become more and more present in yourself, but that presence inside you grows beyond your body, right? Okay. So the presence inside us, which is actually the way we access that presence, is to contact remember the word potency that I used.
Yeah.
Well, the potency is not visible, and it's based on the infinite stillness out of which emanates the Shakti that creates all things, right? It's the Shiva. So to touch the potency, you have to be able to be still inwardly, not your mind. That's impossible. So the stillness inside is what we try to touch when we're meditating. We go inside into the inner body and allow the stillness to envelop us. And if we allow that, now that's a big challenge, right? It's a big challenge to let the stillness take you over, because we have all these stories about that. You know, we're afraid and blah, blah, blah. It's going to control us and, all that. But we get over that over lots of years of practice with meditation. And by accessing the stillness inside, it grows within. And it becomes what I call presence of stillness. And it's that very different, it's a different name for the name that Dr. Sutherland called the capital I intelligence that's responsible for creating everything, but it's the same process. So once we connect with that stillness inside, well, it connects, that's the Shiva, that connects with the Shakti. The emanation.
Explain for the people who don't understand these terminologies.
Okay, good. Well, and I say these things because I'll tell you why in a minute, why I say these terms. The Shiva is the absolute unmanifest potency of the universe. It's all stillness. There's nothing in there. There's no light, there's no sound, there's no creation, there's nothing but the absolute consciousness. So it's pure consciousness, unmanifest. But then in the Vedic philosophy, the absolute stillness, and it's called dynamic stillness, by the way, in Kashmir Shaivism, which is a spiritual path, that emanates at a certain point in time, back in time, and that emanation creates a movement. And that movement is called the feminine principle. The Shiva is the masculine principle, and it's infinite consciousness, unmanifest. And then when consciousness starts to move and create things, that's designated the feminine quality, and that's called the Shakti. It's really simple. It's kind of physics. It's the positive and negative, of physics. And so when positive and negative meet, something else is created. A third mystery is created. And so the Shiva and Shakti are responsible for everything that we see and everything that happens in the world on a larger scale. And inside you, it works. It works. The Shakti, the feminine principle, or the breath of life, another name, works through all of your body, every single one of your cells, and keeps. Imagine this: you have 50 trillion cells in your body, and they're all talking and intercommunicating, and all the processes inside each cell is talking to all the processes inside all the other cells as one unit. And you're sitting here doing a Zoom with me.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
right.
What is that? Right? It's unbelievable. It's beyond, we can't understand it.
Is it similar to prana or chi?
Absolutely. It is different names, same process. Prana is the movement of the life force. Chi is a Taoist term for the life force. And a matter of fact, there was a really fantastic book for any acupuncturists that want to read about the principles. It's called Rooted in Spirit. I don't know if it's in German, but it talks about the shin. And the shin is the heart force. It's the heart force of the Godhead or the goddess head. And it's the radiating principle of life inside the human being. And we're going to talk more about that as we go, because the heart field is very, very important relative to contacting that potency that we were just discussing, the stillness. Because I'll talk about that in one more minute. I want to tell you why I use Shiva Shakti at all, because it's not really permitted in the medical world. It's spiritual, and we don't do spiritual.
Exactly. There is this. No,
we don't do spiritual.
Esoteric and spiritual, and oh my God,
voodoo, But you know what? That's all I do, so I have to talk about it. It's actually the reverse for me. All that's the voodoo, even though it does have some value. But I am not going to put my life in the hands. The first thing I'm going to do when I have a condition, it's not going to go to a hospital, right? That's not the first place I'm going to go. I'm going to go to a cranial practitioner. I'm going to go to an acupuncturist. I'm going to go, right? I'm going to go to all kinds of other people. And the last thing I'm going to do is walk into a hospital to a medical doctor when everything else has shown that it's not going to work. Okay, then maybe I'll go into the drug surgery route, right? I'm not against it, but it's not my first selection. My first selection would be cranial. Or meditation would be my first. My second would be go to a cranial person that's been trained by me. My third would be go to another kind of cranial practitioner, and then or an acupuncturist. And then maybe I would go to an osteopath, a non-medical osteopath, biodynamic osteopath. And then if all that failed, I go, okay, maybe I have to make an appointment with the MD who does drugs.
Before you should go to a homeopath.
Oh, exacto. I do that too. Thank you.
Because that helps very often when people are not have lost all hope. Then
my gosh,
when all the placebo is not working, then you can go to a homeopath because it might work then.
No, it's so true. And I have had tremendous help from a homeopathy. I mean, it saved me in my early years. I was having big problems, and I went to an anthroposophical doctor, and they don't. It's not called homeopathy, but it's homeopathy-like. Their substances are highly potentized. See that word again? They're highly potentized through the limnoscate. They use the limnoscate to stir these substances, and that brings more and more life force, the etheric forces, into the remedy, and then based on the quality of the remedy, whether it's metallic or gold or herb or plant, it affects the different organ systems and the different cells, and then it gives you a result. And it's very non-invasive and non-harmful. So of course I would go there. That would be just forgot about it.
That's great. So we have, we entered the osteopathy or craniosacral work. Through stillness, that is your main focus. You enter, and maybe we can come from another direction. If somebody comes to you and he has some back pain, or he has Or I mean, I know I go to an osteopath when I had maybe an accident or some shock in my body. Immediately, I go to the osteopath, and it is mainly immediately I have a very huge effect. So yeah. So maybe you can talk about that a little. Also, what you how it can help, and what are your experiences?
Okay. So I have to give you the elevator short version of, like, Dr. Ridley, what do you do?
Yeah.
Right? You know, because it doesn't look like I'm doing anything, because I'm not cracking the bones. I'm not manipulating. I'm not doing anything outwardly obvious. I'm just sitting there doing nothing and touching some places.
Yeah.
Right?
I remember that when I have these sessions, but they're so highly efficient.
Yeah. And there's not much, you know, if you videoed it, you go, oh, this is not much happening here. Some osteopaths only touch the heels on the patient all day long, every single day, every single session. The heels are in their hands. They're sitting there. The person's laying. That's all they do. That's the only contact they make. Some. I don't do that. I make more contacts. Look at me. I need more to do, just for my nervous system, right? I probably wouldn't be able to function very well if I had held the heels all day for 8, 9 people a day. I couldn't do it. So everybody that comes in the beginning comes in for a reason, don't they? I have a headache, I have back pain, I have this, I have that. And what are you going to do for me? Well, what I have to do before I answer that is educate them a little bit. So I'll say, well, first of all, I want to let you know that I work a little bit differently, because, you know, a lot of the reason they come in is a medical reason, pain, aches, symptoms, right?
Yeah.
And so I tell them, well, I have to ask you a favor. Will you be willing to try one of my sessions, even though it appears that I'm doing nothing? And they go, well, what do you mean? I says, well, I'm accessing in my work, when I work with you, I access the forces inside me that made my body. And my premise is that the forces that made my body maintains my body and heals my body. And it's the same forces that work in you. So I'm going to connect to my forces inside me, and I'm going to touch you. And that's going to help you connect to those same forces that are inside you. And those are going to have a dialogue. And that dialogue is going to affect me on my inside, my innerness. And that's going to move my hands to particular places in your body, on your body. Would you be willing to do that with me? And they go, and some people go, no, I'm not. I'm not doing that. And I go, okay, well, here, go to this person. But the people, the 80, 90% that say yes, I have them come and lay on the table, and I touch them. And believe it or not, like you mentioned the word back pain, right?
For example,
anything, right? Sometimes when I tell them one more thing, sometimes their reason for coming in might not be addressed on that session. Are you willing to risk that, to gamble that with me? And if they say yes most of the time. But you know what happens is oftentimes other things go away that they didn't even tell me about. So I'll give you an example. This is a funny one. I love this story. I tell it in class. One woman said, I would like to get pregnant. I can't get pregnant. Can you help me? And I says, well, I gave her the elevator story, and I laid her down on the table. I gave her a session, and she came for a few times, and she went, oh, it didn't work. I'm not getting pregnant with my husband. And, I went, well, we tried. Thank you very much. And she started people started coming in from her. One after the other. I'm going, what is going on? This person's repeatedly sending people to me. I didn't help her with the, quote, condition she came for. And so she wrote me about 3 months later, Dear Charles, I just want you to know that even though I adopted a child, so we couldn't get pregnant, but I had surgery on my spine, and I'm a nurse, and I have had intractable low back pain for years because I have to turn big people over on the beds, and your sessions relieved my back pain. I no longer have back pain, and that's why I'm sending you people. I didn't even know she had back pain. But that's why this work is so powerful, and that's why so many people do it. It's because it accesses the deeper forces in the body that were there when the symptoms showed up. And because they were there when the symptoms showed up, and you can access them and activate them, they can unravel the conditions of the person. And the unraveling of the symptom process may not be in the same order that the person comes in with. In other words, they have a grocery list. I want my headache to go away, then I want my TMJ to become better, and I want my insomnia to go down. Well, that list may not be the list of the intelligence, what Dr. Sutherland calls the intelligence. And so if they're willing to give up that list and take a risk and try this, they'll find that not only do their symptoms eventually and gradually go away, but they start to make lifestyle changes that preserves the potency of those forces and brings them to a healthier lifestyle, and their life becomes a healthier life. And they may even start meditating, because I offered that. I offer meditation to the people. So sometimes right there on the table, would you like to meditate? The way I do when I'm touching you before we start, because what I do is I do a little meditation before I begin to touch, and I offer them the opportunity to do the same thing. And a lot of people go, yeah, and I teach them how to meditate. It's really swift. It's not a long process. And so we do that for 2 or 3 minutes. And then I tell them once after a couple of minutes have gone by and I start touching, they can just relax and stay inward. And I'll do the same thing. And I'll be guided by their bodies, inner body presence, their inner body stillness, to move me to places. And that's how the session goes. And that's biodynamics. That's not medical craniosacral therapy. That's not functional work where you're moving cranial bones around and changing the cerebral spinal fluid and directing things. This is more of a very passive, non-doing. The doctor isn't the doer, and the patient isn't an objectified person over there that I'm doing something to. I'm not really giving them a treatment. I'm simply accessing the presence of stillness inside me. The presence of stillness inside them is being accessed. They touch and they talk together, and that moves me to move my hands.
So that's the self-healing force is supported.
Exactly. And that's exactly what it's for. To support that and to enhance it. And you can't have an agenda with this work because that gets in the way. You can't have a goal. You can't have a notion of what's going to happen. You have to give up all of that. You have to work inside, don't know.
But
Very
there's
important.
also this craniosacral work where you feel the pulse and work with the bones very slightly. That does also exist, right?
Very potent. Very potent.
And that is what you also learned first, and then you then you more and more moved into this. That
Exactly.
So this is actually, the more the wisdom comes, the more you give up the technique. I heard that often from other techniques. So the more of a master you become, right?
That's the whole map. The first kind of cranial is called biomechanical, and that's the one I got in 1973. It's just moving the cranial bones, cracking the spine, and that's biomechanical. Crunk, crunk. So change the structure, the function changes. Then there's functional work. And the one you were describing, you feel the motion of the bones, and you work with the motions, and you try to send them into their proper directions so that they can balance out and move equally. That's called functional work. And then this work is called biodynamic, because you're no longer doing the biomechanical or the functional. You're simply resting in yourself in the presence of stillness and letting the breath of life be in charge. And so it's kind of, we won't call it advanced work. It's just work that requires some experience with, well, you have to trust. You have to be able to not be the doer. You have to give up all that college and all those thousands of dollars that you spend on the college. And you have to have a meditative practice, a daily meditative practice to do this work well. You have to be humble and not, I am the doctor and I know everything and you don't know anything, so be quiet and let me give you a treatment and pay me the money when you leave and see me when again, you know. I never tell people to come back. I ask them, they ask me, when do I come back? I says, when you feel that this power that you're in touch with right now, I validate that with them. Are you feeling something inside right now? They go, yeah, I feel very strong power inside. I feel myself. I feel potent. I feel alive. I says, when that goes away and you start wanting it again, that's when you come back. You just write me email, we'll set up another appointment. But I don't tell them to come back. So it's not medical model.
Do you also treat pathologies which are not that easy to be treated, like chronicle issues or cancer, or do these people come to you as well?
Here's the challenge with people that have chronic conditions like chronic fatigue and Lyme's and Epstein-Barr and, you know, all that, is that they don't have a lot of vitality. They don't have a lot of, you use the word chi. Their chi is very low. So oftentimes those people need to go to an osteopath who uses nutrition and supplements first.
Right. That's inherent. So they might go to a homeopath, they might go to an osteopath, they might go to a nutritionist, or all three in one, because sometimes they do all three, sometimes the practitioners, and build their chi up a little bit, because if they're totally exhausted, they won't access the potency. They don't have the power to access it. It actually takes power to access the power, right? And so, when they give me that long chronic list, I usually send them to the osteopath first, and then they can come afterwards, and then they can be helped. But if they're really barely able to get up out of the bed and get into the room and lay on the table, and it can overexhaust them. So you have to clean the whole system, detoxify the colon, and just get enough vitamin D and all that.
All that. And, you know, like you say, detoxify, it might be juicing and all of those things, changing the diet, getting off the things that you're allergic to, the whole thing. And that's important. That's important anyhow, you know. So this just, you know, if you want really the most help, when you want the most help from this kind of work, you need to be a relatively healthy already. If you're already headed into the door of death, this will help you die. I don't mean that negatively. It'll help you traverse the threshold. It'll help you overcome the fear and the terror of death. It'll help you let go of the control. What happens if I let go and die here? It'll help you deal with the emotions and the attachments of your family. So it's a really good for hospice work. And it's really good and it's really good for children that they're just born to have a biodynamic session, because they can get their breathing system aligned with the greater breath, the breath of life. Sometimes being born disrupts their breathing and they're not aligned with the greater breaths. See, biodynamics deals with these greater, more universal breaths. The breath of the earth, the breath of the body, the breath of my environment around me, the Gaia breath. And they're different tempos and different rhythms based on what domain we're accessing. So biodynamics goes through these different domains. The cranial sacral domain, that's more of a nervous system domain. The fluid domain, the fluid breath, goes from the midline to the penumbra around the body. You might call it the aura, and it breathes 12 seconds to the edge of the aura and 12 seconds back. And then there's a longer breath that breathes from the midline all the way to the horizon, takes 50 seconds, and then comes all the way back, takes 50 seconds. So 50 and 50, 110 seconds. That's more of a luminous breath, the breath of the Purusha, or the self, the higher self, and the breath of the earth. Protoplasm, the simplest known protoplasm on earth, is called the slime mold. And they have measured its pulse, and it streams one direction for 50 seconds and switches directions and streams the opposite direction for 50 seconds. And it does that no matter what is happening to its body. And they've done experiments with the body. They gave it coffee and cocaine, and they cut it, they electrocuted it, and the body itself, had an impact, but that rhythm was the same and untouched throughout. Very remarkable. So that's what biodynamics deals with. But we go further. There's one more step. That's basically the sort of the breath of life dimension of biodynamics. Now there's one more dimension that really dives into the source of you and I. And it's, you remember the infinite absolute stillness, potency, and you remember the absolute emanation that creates all things. In the Vedas, the Vedic scriptures, the oldest scriptures known, Sanskrit Veda, they give the quality of that emanation, the Shakti emanation, the quality that they give it is the quality of the love that creates all that is. It's the love of the universe, the love that takes into account each and every cell and tries her best to keep them in harmony. So in the biodynamic world, if you can access the potency deep enough inside yourself, you can discover infinite consciousness within you, the dynamic stillness. And at the dynamic stillness, you realize yourself, your capital Jungian self, your true self, the Purusha, what is called the Purusha, and Jung called the God, goddess man. We have to use language now. The God, goddess man. Your essence of your humanness, your spiritualness and your humanness unite and become one thing. So then in biodynamics, particularly the work that I have been teaching for 20, 30 years, if you continue that journey in the stillness pours into your body and into your cells, and the cells wake up in full consciousness and begin to, and it activates your eros in your body. And you become in absolute contact with the love that creates all that is, vis-a-vis your own, quote, personal eros. So your body reunites with the original love that created you through the stillness. The stillness is the avenue, the portal. And that's the beginning of something that I call the pure breath of love. And it's, and what you begin to experience is something beyond even these bigger rhythms that I was mentioning. Those rhythms disappear in the stillness. They're gone. They come and go, but they're basically gone. They're no longer referenced because they've been absorbed and integrated. When you integrate a state of consciousness, you're not aware of that consciousness anymore because you're no longer separate from it. You are that. That's the beauty of, and people go, oh, it went away. No, it didn't go away. It integrated in you, and it is you now. And you don't know it because you're humble and you're an honest practitioner. Other people notice it, though. Ask around. They go, oh, yeah, people told me that. Well, there it is. See? So with the pure breath of love, what you begin to experience when you touch people on the table is a whole body pulse that's connected to the heartbeat. And you go, what? The heartbeat? Well, that's just normal, right? You're feeling the pulse. Well, you don't feel that pulse in a bone.
Mhm.
You don't feel it in the heel bones. You don't feel it on the kneecap. You don't feel the pulse of the blood, so-called blood pulse of the heart that way. But what you're sensing is the whole body pulse of pure breath of love.
Mhm.
And that tells you something. It tells you that the body has gone so deep into stillness that there is a harmony now in the whole body field. And every cell is talking to every other cell, and health is a byproduct of that.
Mhm.
Byproduct.
So the life force is evoked through stillness. So
Indeed.
life is coming out of stillness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's the whole principle.
And what is happening if you know, there is a person coming to you in the session, or I mean, you give so many groups, so you might. What is when people touch this? Sometimes some emotions might come up, or how do you deal with that?
Beautiful question. Thank you for that question. Because that's what I started running into. This domain didn't reveal itself to me until 2002. This pure breath of love domain, this whole body pulse domain. It has never been in biodynamics before 2002. Nobody ever spoke about it. It happened in my group fields beginning in 2002. I didn't know what was going on, this whole body pulse. And I'm talking vast states of consciousness that are way beyond the pulse, from the body to the aura, or from the body to infinity and back. And the rhythms weren't even there anymore. And I don't know what's going on because there's nowhere to read about it, right? So what happens is when this starts to become accessed in your consciousness, just like you say, it's going to dredge up a lot of your history. Because guess where your history is held? Huh? Your history, your karma is in your body, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we are the history as we look like right now.
As a matter of fact, I don't know if you've interviewed Bruce yet, but Bruce talks about biology becoming a biography becoming biology, right? The tissues hold the karmic. Everything we've ever done is recorded in our tissues.
Yeah.
Everything. So if we've had serious traumas in our lives, when the pure breath of love starts to arise, some of these things are going to become to consciousness. And you're going to remember, oh my God, this thing happened to me when I was 3. I forgot all about it, and I don't know if I can even be with this. Well, a whole new work comes into play.
Yeah.
A whole new responsibility, and I call it the Grail Journey work. I have an entire class now called the Grail Journey, and it's accessing, first of all, understanding how this all happens, understanding how the human organism operates when pure breath of love has been accessed. Because what pure breath of love, see, first of all, when pure breath of love shows up, you said yes to it. It won't come in if you don't say yes. She will never intrude. But you invite her, not consciously, like give her an invitation, but just because you're ready. And you go, I surrender, take me, live me, have me. Yeah, you know, this is the love that creates everything, the divine feminine. So she goes, oh yeah, you really want me, huh? Well, we're going to have to do some work together. She says, you remember when you said no to me when you were this age, and when you said no to me when you were that age, and we said no to me when you did this and you did that? And you go, yeah. And so we're going to have to do some of this together. And so she helps you navigate these places where you recoiled away from love, where you ran from love. And most of those recoils are somatic and unconscious. And so you have to bring them to consciousness. And the way you bring them to consciousness, obviously, is through meditation, but understanding the map of how the body brings those things to below the consciousness. And why it's brought to below consciousness is because some of the traumas are so painful and so overwhelming that we wouldn't function without a protective mechanism.
Exactly.
I don't know about you, but I've had traumas in my life that if it weren't for
Yeah.
my body wisdom, I wouldn't be functioning very well, right? And some people aren't functioning very well because of that. Well, we access that wisdom and re-navigate the journey kind of in reverse through the Grail journey work, and go through all the signposts till we can actually face the original pain of the trauma and be present to it.
I think that is the big key, because that is what we all want to avoid in our life. You know, when this is when we don't like people or whatever. Mostly a trauma is triggered, and this is what we really don't want to see. So I say, but this happens because when you dive more into stillness, more into silence, of course, this comes more and more to the surface, and then it's there, and then because many people think, oh my God, I meditate since years and now I feel so shitty and this and that. And maybe there an understanding is needed to understand, oh, wow, something is maybe coming up to the surface. And how do you welcome that?
Well, first you have to build a little bit more muscles of presence, more strength of presence, because presence and will force are very similar things. Will, the will, like I'm going to dig a hole until the hole is 4 feet deep. That takes some willpower, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to quit smoking. That takes willpower. I'm going to meditate every day. That takes willpower. Building spiritual muscles, just like exercising, takes practice. So you have to build the strength of your presence to be able to endure the intensity of the trauma. Or else you'll just run away like we normally do. We'll just run away out of the room. We'll disassociate or shut down or come up with excuses, any excuses. I had a lady once tell me that she couldn't come to my class because she got a message from that she shouldn't show up. And I go, well, what showed you that message? She says, I had trouble transferring the money. And I'm going to myself, oh my God, that's not very strong will force. It's a confession, right? Some people come up with any little nothing to not really face something that's difficult, and that's not going to help us in these times. These times we need supreme strength of presence to survive these times. Tough times right now, right?
Absolutely. I mean,
are we in tough times? So the Grail journey is essential. And it doesn't have to be called the Grail journey, but facing yourself is essential. Navigating the traumas, the pain of the traumas is essential. Now, here's the rub. Here's the problem. All right. Do you have any pets? Have you ever had pets in your life?
Yeah.
Dogs, cats, right?
Dogs, cats. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hamster, birds, anything.
All right.
I come from a farm.
See, so you know. Have you ever had a pet who hurt themselves and you were around when that happened and they kind of blamed you for it, even though you didn't do anything? Have you ever had that happen?
To a pet?
I'll give you my example. My dog fell down off the deck 8 feet and hurt himself. And when I came to get him and brought him back to the top, up into the house, he was afraid of me because he blamed me for throwing him off the deck, even though I didn't throw him off the deck.
Okay.
And people have had that experience where, like, sometimes a cat will have something happen and you're near and they blame you for it. Well, our young consciousness does that when we get traumatized. So let me give you a good example. I have a trauma in my life. Something happens that's very traumatic. And I go into a disassociation or I go into a shutdown and a depression, whatever my reaction is, that is the reaction. But because I'm young, a lot of our big traumas happen when we're very young. Because I'm young, that's a misperception can happen. what that trauma does, by the way, it separates us from our eros, from our love in our bodies, streaming our Reichian life force in our bodies. But what happens with the youth, the little child that got hurt, is they misperceive that the trauma and the eros are the same thing.
Mhm.
So anytime the eros or the potency or the stillness shows up, we recoil from it because we're afraid it's going to traumatize us.
Mhm.
You know this mechanism, right?
Mhm.
A lot of people are afraid of the potency, afraid of the power of the stillness, afraid of the spiritual states, because they're afraid something bad, something traumatic is going to happen.
Yeah.
They're afraid their trauma is going to repeat.
Mhm.
The trauma they couldn't
Exactly.
even take. See?
Yeah.
So that's part of the Grail journey map, is understanding that. Once you
That's why
understand,
many people neglect the whole studies on silence, and they don't want to, never ever want to be in silence or sit silently, and
exactly,
that's why we are also restless, and
exactly,
because
exactly.
everything will come up then.
And that's why we smoke and drink and do whatever we do.
Exactly.
Addictions,
Yeah.
the whole thing is to avoid feeling that.
Mhm.
And really, unfortunately, because of the misperception, it avoids us contacting our own life force and our own eros, our
Mhm.
own will.
Mhm.
So we become increasingly more weak-willed and less able to function in this more and more increasingly intense planet. It's a horrible situation. So we've got to get up and the Bible, where, remember the story where the man is laying by the healing waters on his bed and he's paralyzed, and Jesus walks by and he goes, "Jesus, heal me." And
Mhm.
Jesus looks at him and says, "Take up your bed and walk." In other words, get your will force activated, grab your bed and do your own work. I'll
Mhm.
help you, but you've got to get up and do the walking. Well,
Mhm.
that's what this Grail journey is about. It's about taking your own walk on your own journey to get in touch with your own Grail. And your
Mhm.
Grail substance is your life force. It's your divine feminine essence.
Mhm.
It's what made your body, what heals your body, what brings you to greater states of consciousness. And if you avoid and resist and recoil from that, we're going to become increasingly weaker and more a plaything to these ugly forces we're seeing on the planet right now,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So the call is here. The time is now. There's no more time left for those that hear the call. No more excuses. No more, oh, I couldn't transfer the money, so I can't meditate, or whatever it is. It's time to do the work. I gave 2 chapters to this in my book, Stillness Touch, that's in German and in English, because
Mhm.
it's so important. And now it's the fulcrum course of my 3 courses that I teach for learning the Stillness Touch work. It's so important. And I got to tell you how powerful it is hearing people speak about their core wounds and accessing them and confronting the terror and confronting the trauma and confronting this everything about all the avoidance history, and then letting it's like bringing a child back that ran away and bringing them back to the mother. And
Mhm.
that's what the Grail journey is for. And then pure breath of love explodes in your body. And
So
then you
that
become
you will be in this presence, in this love presence. You're still there, very clear, full in your power, and
complete.
you have completely, you have empathy for everything that happens around you. Is it like that?
Exactly like that. And that's it. There's a little bit of bad news. There's always good news and bad news. The bad, it's not really bad news because you've got strength, but the bad news is you become more sensitive.
Mhm. Ah,
You
that's
become
very good news.
right. You become more innocent. You
Mhm.
become more vulnerable.
Mhm.
But if you've built your strength of presence and you've navigated your wounds through your Grail journey, you're okay. And you adapt. You become, like going to the big grocery store sometimes is very difficult, right? Sometimes you've got
Mhm.
to have a great meditation and you go to the grocery store and you go, oh my God, that was too much. Well, that happens. And you become more and more acclimated to that tenderness that you live in. But the work is to stay in that tenderness, to stay in that vulnerability, not run from it because it's going to break you or hurt you or traumatize you, but to stay with it. And it becomes more and more of a habit until it becomes nature. And then your ego structure that has been the one that sent you away from the love all your life, you know, right? The ego, the little me, the one that's afraid of the divine feminine, afraid of the wound because it feels like the love did it, so it's not going to have the love. That becomes a helper. And so the whole synergy process starts up. And it goes, hey, you didn't meditate today. Get back, come on, sit. The ego does that after you had that transmutation where the love is inside. And you become normal. Normal. This is normal. We've been abnormal all our lives.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? This is natural. It's our natural state. It's the normal me now. And everything's, you know, there's nowhere to go, nothing to do, nothing to achieve. I'm here. I could go have my breakfast. I do some writing. I meditate every morning. You know, I go to the store. Nothing complicated, and life is okay. But I still have my personality. I still have my little things that irritate me. I still have my anger. I still have my rage about the world right now and how it's going and what's happening. You get to be who you are, human and all. You don't become this angel with a halo that only does love, light, and bliss. You become a fierce-hearted, fully present warrior for the good and the beautiful and the true.
Guardian angel.
Exactly. Yes, you actually become united with your guardian angel. They become non-separate. The guardian angel actually becomes part of you. And it's no longer a tap from the outside, it's from the inside. That's a really well put. I've never heard it put that way. That's a very well way to put it. Your guardian angel actually unites and starts to express through you and points out, oh, Charles, if you go to that store today, you're going to be completely plastered and traumatized. So why don't you just not go today and go tomorrow? And you go, okay, because you're in tune now. You're in tune. You're in your Tao.
So you are more sensitive and still very strong and very, empathic. That's what I said before already.
Empathic, yeah. And empathic based on who you are and what your software operating system is. You know, human design, by the way, is a good thing to do if you know about human design.
We have an interview about that as well here.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah. Well, it's a wonderful thing because it gives you your software operating system. Yeah. And you stop beating yourself up for being yourself. Because I remember beating myself up for not really wanting to be all that social and not wanting to go to parties and all of those things. And then finally I got my human design reading and it was like normal for me because I'm a projector. I'm a splenic projector and I'm supposed to be alone. I'm supposed to meditate. I'm supposed to take care of myself in an empty room for lots of hours in a day. And I don't have a lot of energy that's my energy. And so I don't have to like beat myself with the horse stick because I'm Charles. So human design is very valuable. Yeah.
Charles, beautiful. I'm very happy and thrilled and now ecstatic even. And
thanks for the great questions.
Really resonates very strongly what you say also in me. And I also had experience, so I can completely, how to say, I can relate to everything you said. And
fantastic.
Thank you so much for sharing this. And I think it's a very big help for our audience, and especially in these days, which we have, especially here in Europe, where they create wars and then they have no gas in the winter, and you know, everything is, and it's good that we come and face that with a less traumatized view. And it's beautiful that you emphasize on that so clearly.
Yes. One quick example, my Prague organizer will not organize me next year because she's terrified that the bills are going to be too high and nobody's going to come to the class. So I'm going to have to organize my own class for Prague next year. I'm not letting what's happening in Europe stop me. I'm going to go to Prague. I'm going to do my
Yeah, the
classes.
people also, it is so important now for everybody yeah, it is more important than anything else. So maybe buy not so, we better don't buy another iPhone. We better invest in ourselves now.
Fantastic. Yes, we agree on that 100%. We're on the same wavelength with this.
Thank you,
so
Charles.
much. All right.
Thank you so much.
Talk to you later.